In the heart of Stockholm's old town, known as Gamla Stan, the cobbled streets stretch quietly between buildings that have stood for centuries. These stones, worn smooth by time, are more than just a charming backdrop for tourists. They are part of the city's foundation, laid down with purpose, shaped by necessity, and preserved through generations. Cobblestone paving in Stockholm began in the 13th century when the city was still young and growing. At that time, roads were mostly dirt. They turned to mud in the rain, froze unevenly in winter, and made travel difficult. Horses struggled to pull carts through the muck, and walking could be slow and messy. So, the city began to pave its most important streets with cobblestones, rounded stones gathered from nearby fields, riverbeds, or carried in by ships. These stones were chosen for their durability. They could withstand harsh weather, heavy loads, and constant foot traffic. The earliest cobbled streets were laid loosely, with gaps between the stones to allow water to drain naturally. This helped prevent flooding and reduced erosion. Over time, the technique improved, stones were set more tightly, creating smoother surfaces and more reliable paths. Cobblestones were first used on streets that mattered most, those leading to churches, markets, and the royal palace. These were the places where people gathered, where goods were traded, and where officials moved through the city. Paving these routes made sense. It kept the city cleaner, made transport easier, and gave Stockholm a more organized appearance. As the city expanded, more streets were paved. Cobblestones became a symbol of urban development. They marked the difference between a growing town and a settled city. In wealthier districts, the stones were laid with care, forming neat patterns and even surfaces. In poorer areas, the paving was rougher, sometimes incomplete. The stones themselves varied in size and color: grey, brown, blue, Bopas peach, and even reddish tones, depending on where they came from. Interestingly, many of Stockholm's cobblestones arrived by ship. Vessels coming into the harbor often carried stones as ballast, heavy material used to stabilize the ship when it wasn't carrying cargo. Once docked, these stones were offloaded and repurposed for paving. It was a practical solution. The city needed stones, and the ships needed weight. This exchange helped Stockholm grow one street at a time. Cobblestones weren't just used for roads. They appeared in courtyards, public squares, and even alleyways. Their rough texture made them slip resistant, which was useful in Sweden's icy winters. They also helped define space. A cobbled square felt different from a dirt path. It was a place to gather, to talk, to trade. Walking on these streets today is a tactile experience. You feel the uneven rhythm beneath your feet. Some stones are smooth from centuries of footsteps, others are chipped, sunken, or slightly raised. The sound of shoes on stone is distinct, a soft echo that connects past and present. In Gamla Stan, the cobbled streets curve and narrow, following the old layout of the medieval city. They weren't designed for cars or buses. They were built for people, horses, and carts. That's why they feel intimate. The buildings rise close on either side, and the stones guide you forward, one step at a time. Despite modern development, Stockholm has preserved many of its cobbled streets, not just for aesthetics, but because they're part of the city's identity. They remind residents and visitors alike that this place has history not just in its museums or monuments, but in the very ground beneath their feet. Today, cobblestones are maintained carefully, repairs are done by hand using traditional methods, stones are lifted, cleaned, and reset. It's slow work, but it keeps the streets authentic. In some areas, modern paving has replaced cobblestones for practical reasons, but in Gamla Stan, the stones remain. They've seen royal processions, market days, quiet walks, and busy mornings. They've held up through snowstorms, celebrations, and centuries of change, and they continue to do their job quietly, reliably, without fuss. So when you walk through Stockholm's old town, take a moment to look down. The cobblestones beneath you aren't just decoration. They're history, laid one stone at a time, telling the story of a city that grew from mud and trade into something lasting.